Around 1 a.m. on the 25th of February, 1942, air raid sirens resounded throughout Los Angeles County. The military, the media, and the public panicked because, you see, they thought there were unidentified aircraft flying above the city. Welcome back. As always, thank you for tuning in. That's Matt behind the camera. I'm Ben. Most importantly, you're here. That makes this stuff they don't want you to know. This week, Matt, Noel, and I are looking into a strange, bizarre, and obscure historical event. You may know it as the Battle of Los Angeles, or the battle over Los Angeles, because you see, for an hour, there was absolute pandemonium in the air. What we're talking about is a matter of what some people will say is mass hysteria, some people will say is government embarrassment, and some people will say is honest to God UFO activity. This idea comes from World War II US. So when we talk about the events that occurred here, we have to understand that there's some propaganda involved and there's a bit of murky reporting. After the air raid sirens go off around 1 a.m. on that day, at around 3:16 a.m., the military begins firing anti-aircraft artillery, and these rounds weigh like 12.8 pounds. They're pretty big. They're firing at what they believe to be unidentified aircraft, and multiple groups are firing from multiple positions. This goes on for about an hour. They send about 1,500 shells into the air. The official reports say that buildings were damaged and that 5 civilians died, but only due to indirect causes. So they weren't actually hit by a shell, but someone might have had a heart attack or someone might have had a car accident. The cover-up begins, or the legend begins, or the conspiracy theory begins when we look at the official statements of the Navy and the Army. The Navy made a statement. A day later, the Army made a statement which contradicted what the Navy said. LA Times reporters most famously published a photograph, which you can see nowadays very easily online, of what appears to be a saucer with multiple rays of light beaming on it. And then thousands of eyewitnesses also. This is what's missing from Roswell. There are many people who saw something in the sky, but there are not many people who saw the wreckage. Here, there was a city full of people who said, yes, I saw this, lozenge-shaped thing flying around over LA. What was this? What launched the battle over Los Angeles? Here are 3 possibilities. The first possibility, and the one initially floated by the commanding officers of the Army at the time, was that this was a Japanese attack. We have to keep in mind this occurred shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and many Americans, as well as military officials, felt like the west coast of the continental United States was next up on the list. If it were a Japanese attack, where would they come from? Slightly before that attack occurred, or before the incident called the Battle of Los Angeles, a Japanese submarine had surfaced off the Pacific coast, which further exacerbated the panic mode that people were already in. Additionally, there were fears that perhaps the Japanese army had hidden posts in the domestic US. And that was not some fringe theory especially, it was a military theory that they were floating. So how would they have done this? Well, one of the theories, based on what people reportedly saw that they began firing at, was that the shape was spherical rather than a flat disc or saucer. This is important because the Japanese army did, during World War II, experiment with weaponized balloons in a secret program that the US government did not know existed until one of these balloons killed 6 picnickers out in Oregon. However, all the sources that we can find, both from Japanese historical archives and from US archives and all the other post-World War II stuff that became declassified so far, all of that stuff tells us that these weaponized balloons didn't come into play until well after the Battle of Los Angeles. But there is also evidence that British research into a similar type of program, essentially a balloon that is a bomb, goes back to 1937 in the United Kingdom and was used in that theater of the war before the battle over Los Angeles. So it is possible that a stray balloon could have just floated over the city and caused this panic. Possible, but not probable at this point. The second proposed theory would be meteorological balloons, not propelled by one other country to a different country, but by our own country. And for people who believe this, there are several interesting things. These balloons were commonly used by the military in the area at the time, and that they sent out signals with them and released in a routine pattern. There are multiple military bases. One of them releases it out of schedule, or the other one is not aware of the schedule. Then it may look like some sort of unidentified aircraft, especially if we consider that these people are sitting by their loaded anti-aircraft guns, being told to expect an attack from the Pacific at any given moment. It can lead to a panic situation. Number 3, a genuine UFO. Now, a UFO, as you recall in earlier episodes, does not necessarily mean some sort of extraterrestrial civilization, some kind of ET meets Elliot stuff. What it means is simply that for one reason or another, and to one degree or another, people cannot identify the thing in the sky. It could be Superman. In this situation, the eyewitness accounts typically are describing a large object, some would say saucer-shaped object, but the problem with eyewitness accounts is that if we're talking about thousands of people seeing something, it's very easy to cherry pick what you want to report. So these eyewitness accounts don't always match. They don't always agree on stuff. And if something is planted into the public consciousness, then people will begin not exactly lying. They will genuinely believe they remember whatever that seed that was planted happened to be. Check out our stuff on memory, by the way. Distressing and disturbing. So the eyewitness accounts don't all match, and the skeptics for this have their own answers as well. In the case of the photograph, you can find some articles by people at the LA Times explaining how retouching of photographs worked during that time. And it's not some vast overarching conspiracy from the way they explain it. They say the retouching occurs so that they can have a better quality picture when it hits print. In 1983, the US government did an investigation. They evaluated these 3 different causes along with some other theories. And can you guess what they concluded? You are correct. Weather balloons, meteorological weather balloons, AKA nothing to see here, folks. There's also the implication that the government did initially cover it up because it was embarrassing to admit that they fired at their own stuff, and that shooting, again, these pretty large rounds, 12.8 pounds, into the air, having them explode would look to somebody else from another location like another enemy aircraft, so they were firing guns at each other, would be that explanation, if you believe that domestic weather balloon explanation. However, as we record this in 2016, many people do not believe the official story, and many people believe, for one reason or another, it was the subject of an active and fairly successful cover-up. Journalists at the time say the same thing. We do know, regardless of the explanation behind this bizarre and strange event, it had real-world damaging consequences that went beyond buildings, went beyond car accidents and heart attacks. This accelerated the internment process for innocent American civilians who happened to be Japanese American. And they were interrogated, they were carted off to places, and the ultimate victim of the battle over Los Angeles was the American conscience. And the scars from that remain today, and it doesn't matter how many buildings fall or are built. This is one of those events up there with the JFK assassination that led the US at large to trust its government less and less and less. What other instances similar to this have occurred but aren't examined as often as they should be? What are the other lesser-known Roswells, and should we cover them on this show? We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can tell us on Facebook, you can tell us on Twitter, you can tell us in the comments down here, and if you want to write to us directly, send us an email. We are conspiracy@howstuffworks.com.